Hare Krishna devotees, welcome to our Sunday Srimad Bhagavatam class. Today we're going to begin a new chapter, which is chapter 5 of canto number 1, where Narada Muni is going to instruct Srila Vyasadeva. But it's been a while since we met for classes. So in chapter 4, which was titled Appearance of Sri Narada, Narada Muni actually appears only at the very end of chapter 4. So he doesn't come before that. But in the meantime, the sages are gathered in Naimisharanya, and led by Shaunaka Rishi. They glorify Suta Goswami, who has arrived there to benedict them with the divine words of Srimad Bhagavatam. So they pose 3 questions to Suta Goswami. The first question is about the history of Srimad Bhagavatam itself. How did Srimad Bhagavatam come about? That is actually the beginning of this chapter 5 and chapter 4 itself. That sets the stage for how Srimad Bhagavatam was actually compiled by Srila Vyasadeva. So their first question was, what is the history of Srimad Bhagavatam? Their second question was, who is this Shukadev Goswami? What are his qualities? And how was he received and perceived in Hastinapur? And their third question was, who is this listener, Parikshit Maharaj? And what are his qualities? What is so exalted about his birth, his activities, and finally his renunciation of his kingdom at such a young age? So essentially, if you look at it, their questions were about Srimad Bhagavatam, the speaker of Srimad Bhagavatam, Shukadev Goswami, and the listener of Srimad Bhagavatam, Parikshit Maharaj. After getting the answers to these questions, then Suta Goswami begins to elaborate the background of what was happening to Srila Vyasadeva. What was his emotional state of mind? Did he feel good about himself? Actually, what Srila Vyasadeva was contemplating is Kali Yuga has begun. And he was thinking that the people in Kali Yuga are so degraded. They will not be able to understand the Vedic scriptures as it was. So to benedict the Kali Yuga Vasis, Srila Vyasadeva decides to split up the Vedas into 4. So he entrusts this task of splitting up the Vedas into 4 different portions to his 4 disciples, who then enumerate upon these 4 particular Vedas, specifically for the benefit of those in Kali Yuga. And later on, Srila Vyasadeva himself compiles the Mahabharata. Primarily, it is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam for the women and the other classes who may not have access to the Vedic scriptures directly. And in spite of completing such a monumental task by himself and then with the help of his 4 disciples, he is not satisfied. Something is amiss. He feels that there is a void. And he wonders at the end of the 4th chapter, is this void perhaps because he has not glorified the Lord? The vast section of the Vedic scriptures are to do with Karma Kanda. It's all about helping the Jivatmas achieve their various material desires, their material goals, the material objectives. So just as he was wondering, is this the mistake that I made? His guru appears. And that sets the stage for chapter 5. So in chapter 5, Narada Muni has come to give instructions to Srila Vyasadeva. Anytime a disciple is down on himself or herself, Guru will make an appearance, either directly or indirectly, and Hence, Narada Muni graces Srila Vyasadeva with his presence and with his guidance. So, what do we notice in our scriptures? When somebody is despondent, the Guru comes, chastises him, and gives him the direction. When Arjuna was despondent, Sri Krishna chastised him and then gave him instructions. When Yudhishthira was despondent, the speech by Sri Bhishma Dev appears. When Mother Devahuti was despondent, her son Kapila Muni provides his instructions to his mother. So in some way, shape or form, the student is always guided by the spiritual master. When it appears that the student has a doubt in his mind or is despondent and is looking for a solution. So at that time, the spiritual master will appear to give clarity on what he or she needs to do. So what we will do first is quickly read the shlokas in chapter 5, and then we will take up the first 7 shlokas. So this chapter is titled Narada's Instructions on Srimad Bhagavatam for Vyasadeva. Srimad Bhagavatam has not been written yet. Vyasadeva, along with his disciples, has only completed splitting up the Vedic scriptures, and Vyasadeva has written the Mahabharata. So this chapter begins with Suta Goswami said, "Thus the sage among the gods, Narada, comfortably seated and apparently smiling, addressed the rishi among the Brahmanas, Vedavyasa. Addressing Vyasadeva, the son of Parashara, Narada inquired, 'Are you satisfied by identifying with the body or the mind as objects of self-realization?'" So you can see Narada Muni wastes no time, comes straight to the point, asking him, "Are you satisfied with what you have written? Your inquiries were full and your studies were also well fulfilled. And there is no doubt that you have prepared a great and wonderful work, the Mahabharata, which is full of all kinds of Vedic sequences elaborately explained. You have fully delineated the subject of impersonal Brahman as well as the knowledge derived therefrom. Why should you be despondent in spite of all this, thinking that you are undone, my dear Prabhu?" Sri Vyasadeva said, "All you have said about me is perfectly correct. Despite all this, I am not pacified. I therefore question you about the root cause of my dissatisfaction. For you are a man of unlimited knowledge due to your being the offspring of one Brahma who is self-born, without mundane father and mother. My Lord, everything that is mysterious is known to you because you worship the creator and destroyer of the material world and the maintainer of the spiritual world, the original personality of Godhead, who is transcendental to the 3 modes of material nature. Like the sun, your goodness can travel everywhere in the 3 worlds. And like the air, you can penetrate the internal region of everyone. As such, you are as good as the all-pervasive Supersoul. Please therefore find out the deficiency in me, despite my being absorbed in transcendence under disciplinary regulations and vows." Sri Narada said, "You have not actually broadcast the sublime and spotless glories of the personality of Godhead. That philosophy, which does not satisfy the transcendental senses of the Lord, is considered worthless. Although, great sage, you have very broadly described the 4 principles, beginning with religious performances, you have not described the glories of the Supreme Personality, Vasudeva. Those words which do not describe the glories of the Lord, who alone can sanctify the atmosphere of the whole universe, are considered by saintly persons to be like unto a place of pilgrimage for crows. Since the all-perfect persons are inhabitants of the transcendental abode, they do not derive any pleasure there. On the other hand, that literature, which is full of descriptions of the transcendental glories of the name, fame, forms, pastimes, etc., of the unlimited Supreme Lord, is a different creation, full of transcendental words, directed toward bringing about a revolution in the impious lives of this world's misdirected civilization. Such transcendental literatures, even though imperfectly composed, are heard, sung, and accepted by purified men who are thoroughly honest. So essentially, Sri Narad Muni is telling his student, his disciple, that yeah, it's what you've done is a great thing. You've compiled the Vedas, you have put together the Mahabharata, but any literature that does not glorify the Supreme Lord is of no use. It doesn't bring about a transformation of the self. Whereas any literature that is composed that describes the glories of the Lord, even if the composition is imperfect, it will purify those who hear it and those who sing it. Knowledge of self-realization, even though free from all material affinity, does not look well if devoid of a conception of the infallible God. What then is the use of fruitive activities which are naturally painful from the very beginning and transient by nature if they are not utilized for the devotional service of the Lord? O Vyasadeva, your vision is completely perfect. Your good fame is spotless. You are firm in vow and situated in truthfulness. And thus you can think of the pastimes of the Lord in trance for the liberation of the people in general for all material bondage. Whatever you desire to describe that is separate in vision from the Lord simply reacts with different forms, names, and results to agitate the mind, as the wind agitates a boat which has no resting place. The people in general are naturally inclined to enjoy, and you have encouraged them in that way in the name of religion. This is verily condemned and is quite unreasonable. Because they are guided under your instructions, they will accept such activities in the name of religion and will hardly care for prohibitions. After glorifying Srila Vyasadeva, Narad Muni then critiques him, saying, whatever you have compiled, whatever you have written, people will be misled because they will be so caught up in trying to fulfill their material desires, they will hardly care to lead regulated lives, to aspire for spirituality. The Supreme Lord is unlimited. Only a very expert personality, retired from the activities of material happiness, deserves to understand this knowledge of spiritual values. Therefore, those who are not so well situated due to material attachment should be shown the ways of transcendental realization by your goodness through descriptions of the transcendental activities of the Supreme Lord. So Narada Muni is telling Vyasadeva, your work is not complete. Your work is not complete. And the reason you are unhappy with yourself is because you have not glorified the Lord. And by glorifying the Lord, you will also help the Jivatmas who are suffering in this material world. One who has forsaken his material occupations to engage in the devotional service of the Lord may sometimes fall down while in an immature stage, yet there is no danger of his being unsuccessful. On the other hand, a non-devotee, though fully engaged in occupational duties, does not gain anything. Persons who are actually intelligent and philosophically inclined should endeavor for that purposeful end, which is not obtainable even by wandering from the topmost planet, Brahmaloka, down to the lowest planet, Patala. As far as happiness derived from sense enjoyment is concerned, it can be obtained automatically in course of time. Just as in course of time, we obtain miseries, even though we do not desire them. My dear Vyasa, even though a devotee of Lord Krishna sometimes falls down somehow or other, he certainly does not undergo material existence like others, fruitive workers, etc. Because a person who has once relished the taste of the lotus feet of the Lord can do nothing but remember that ecstasy again and again. The Supreme Lord, personality of Godhead, is himself this cosmos, and still he is aloof from it. From him only has this cosmic manifestation emanated. In him it rests, and unto him it enters after annihilation. Your good self knows all about this. I have given only a synopsis. Your goodness has perfect vision. You yourself can know the supersoul personality of Godhead because you are present as the plenary portion of the Lord. Although you are birthless, you have appeared on this earth for the well-being of all people. Please therefore describe the transcendental pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, more vividly. So Narada Muni is acknowledging that Srila Vyasadeva is one of the Shaktyavesh avatars of the Lord. Why would an avatar of the Lord be unhappy with himself? Well, that's because the Supreme Personality of God had put him in that position so that the Srimad Bhagavatam could be spoken. Learned circles have positively concluded that the infallible purpose of the advancement of knowledge, namely austerities, study of the Vedas, sacrifice, chanting of hymns and charity, culminates in the transcendental descriptions of the Lord, who is defined in choice poetry. O Muni, in the last millennium, I was born as the son of a certain maidservant engaged in the service of Brahmanas who were following the principles of Vedanta. When they were living together during the 4 months of the rainy season, I was engaged in their personal service. Narada Muni is recounting his past life. Although they were impartial by nature, those followers of the Vedanta blessed me with their causeless mercy. As far as I was concerned, I was self-controlled and had no attachment for sports, even though I was a boy. In addition, I was not naughty, and I did not speak more than required. Once only, by their permission, I took the remnants of their food, and by so doing, all my sins were at once eradicated. Thus being engaged, I became purified in heart, and at that time, the very nature of the transcendentalist became attractive to me. O Vyasadeva, in that association, and by the mercy of those great Vedantists, I could hear them describe the attractive activities of Lord Krishna. And thus, listening attentively, my taste for hearing of the personality of Godhead increased at every step. So Narada Muni is tracing for Srila Vyasadeva how he became a devotee by associating with other devotees and having an opportunity to serve them and having an opportunity to eat the remnants of what they had eaten. So it became like Maha Prasadam. O great sage, as soon as I got a taste of the personality of Godhead, my attention to hear of the Lord was unflinching. As my taste developed, I could realize that it was only in my ignorance that I had accepted gross and subtle coverings, for both the Lord and I are transcendental. In the sense, Narada Muni is saying, through the association of these sadhus, he understood the difference between body and soul. One is temporary, the other is transcendental. Thus, during 2 seasons, the rainy season and autumn, I had the opportunity to hear these great soul sages constantly chant the unadulterated glories of the Lord Hari. As the flow of my devotional service began, the coverings of the modes of passion and ignorance vanished. I was very much attached to those sages. I was gentle in behavior, and all my sins were eradicated in their service. In my heart, I had strong faith in them. I had subjugated the senses, and I was strictly following them with body and mind. As they were leaving, those Bhakti Vedantas, who are very kind to poor-hearted souls, instructed me in that most confidential subject, which is instructed by the personality of Godhead himself. By that confidential knowledge, I could understand clearly the influence of the energy of Lord Sri Krishna, the creator, maintainer, and annihilator of everything. By knowing that, one can return to him and personally meet him. O Brahmana Vyasadeva, it is decided by the learned that the best remedial measure for removing all troubles and miseries is to dedicate one's activities to the service of the Supreme Lord, Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna. O good soul, does not a thing applied therapeutically cure a disease which was caused by that very same thing? Thus, when all a man's activities are dedicated to the service of the Lord, those very activities which caused his perpetual bondage become the destroyer of the tree of work. Narada Muni is actually glorifying Bhakti Yoga. Simply by continuing your prescribed duties and responsibilities, just adding Krishna to the picture, all your work gets purified. The same work that caused bondage, when Krishna is in the picture, that same work causes liberation. Whatever work is done here in this life for the satisfaction of the mission of the Lord is called Bhakti Yoga, or transcendental loving service to the Lord. And what is called knowledge becomes a concomitant factor. While performing duties according to the order of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one constantly remembers him, his names, and his qualities. So, Nama, Rupa, Guna, and Leela. These are the four things that pervade the Srimad Bhagavatam. Let us all chant the glories of Vasudeva along with his plenary expansions Pradyumna, Aniruddha, and Sankarshana. Thus, he is the actual seer who worships in the form of transcendental sound representation the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu, who has no material form. O Brahmana, thus, by the Supreme Lord Krishna, I was endowed first with the transcendental knowledge of the Lord, as inculcated in the confidential part of the Vedas, then with the spiritual opulences, and then with his intimate loving service. So Narada Muni is describing the sequence in which he came in closer proximity and offering service finally to the Supreme Lord himself. It began with knowledge. Please therefore describe the Almighty Lord's activities which you have learned by a vast knowledge of the Vedas, for that will satisfy the hankering of great learned men, and at the same time mitigate the miseries of the masses of common people who are always suffering from material pangs. Indeed, there is no other way to get out of such miseries. So Narada Muni is saying, doing this by glorifying the Supreme Lord, putting it in writing, you will not only satisfy yourself, you will cure your own misery, but you will also help so many Jivatmas come in contact with the Srimad Bhagavatam, which will act as a medicine to cure their miseries as well. And Narada Muni concludes by saying, there is actually no other way of getting out of this miserable condition in life other than hearing Srimad Bhagavatam. So in essence, in this particular chapter, if you look at the sections, I'm just reading from the Subodhini put together by His Grace Gauranga Darshan Prabhu. So shlokas 1 to 7, which we'll try and finish today. So Narada Muni asks questions and then Srila Vyasadeva responds. Then from shlokas 8 to 22, Narada Muni reveals to Vyasadeva the importance of talking about the pastimes of the Lord. And when you talk about the pastimes of the Lord, the Nama, Rupa, Guna and Leela also automatically come into the picture. Then from 23 to 31, Narada Muni is talking about how he himself became a devotee through association. Through association as a young child. And then from 32 to 40, Narada Muni gives his instructions to his student, telling him, this is what you should do. If you do this, not only will you be satisfied, but the vast majority of Kali Yuga Vasis who will be so fortunate to get access to Srimad Bhagavatam, thanks to great acharyas and devotees like Srila Prabhupada, who has translated for us in English so painstakingly, all the way up to Canto 10, that we can also relish the Srimad Bhagavatam and get out of this miserable condition of life. So with that, we begin with Shloka 1 of Chapter 5 of Canto 1. Suta Uvacha
Suta Uvacha
Athattam Sukhamasina
Atattam Sukham Asina
Upasinam Brihachravaha
Upasinam Brahachravaha
Devarshif Praha Viprarshim
Devarshif Praha Viprarshim
Veena Panismayan Iva.
Veena Pani Smayan Iva.
Okay, word for word meaning, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai.
We have to do word for word meaning. Sutaha,
Sutaha
Suta,
Suta
Uvacha,
Uvacha
said,
said
Atha,
Ata
therefore,
therefore
Tam,
Tam
him,
him
Sukham Asinaha,
Sukham Asinaha
comfortably seated,
comfortably seated
Upasinam,
Upasinam
unto one sitting nearby,
unto one sitting nearby
Brihat Shravaha,
Brahachravaha
greatly respected,
greatly respected
Devarshihi,
Devarshihi
the great Rishi among the gods,
the great Rishi among the gods
Praha,
Praha
said,
said
Viprarshim,
Viprarshim
unto the Rishi among the Brahmanas,
unto the Rishi among the Brahmanas
Veena Panihi,
Veena Panihi
one who carries a veena in his hand,
one who carries a veena in his hand
Smayan Iva,
Smayan Iva
apparently smiling.
apparently smiling.
Translation, Suta Goswami said,
Suta Goswami said,
thus the sage amongst the gods,
thus the sage amongst the gods
Narada,
Narada
comfortably seated
comfortably seated
and apparently smiling,
addressed
the Rishi
the Rishi
among the Brahmanas,
amongst the Brahmanas,
Veda Vyasa.
Veda Vyasa.
But Narada was smiling because he well knew the great sage Veda Vyasa and the cause of his disappointment. So when someone smiles, it doesn't necessarily mean that they are poking fun at you or they think less of you. Sometimes the smile is to acknowledge that they have understood your problem and they already know the solution. Similarly, in the Bhagavad Gita also, when Arjuna was despondent, it says clearly that Lord Krishna smiled and he promptly chastised Arjuna. As he will explain gradually, Vyasadeva's disappointment was due to insufficiency in presenting the science of devotional service. Narada knew the defect and it was confirmed by the position of Vyasa. So, in these 7 shlokas that we are covering today, Srila Prabhupada's purport is very, very short and to the point. So, that brings us to shloka number 2. Narada Uvacha
Narada Uvacha
Parasharyam Mahabhaga
Parasharya Mahabhaga
Bhavatah Kachidatmana
Bhavatah Kachid Atmana
Paritushyati Sharira
Paritushyati Sharira
Atma Manasa Evava
Atma Manasa Evava
Naradaha
Naradaha
Narada
Narada
Uvacha
Uvacha
said
said
Parasharya,
Parasharya,
O son of Parashara,
O son of Parashara,
Mahabhaga,
Mahabhaga,
the greatly fortunate,
the greatly fortunate,
Bhavataha,
Bhavataha,
your,
your,
Kachit,
Kachit,
if it is,
if it is,
Atmana,
Atmana,
by the self-realization of,
by the self-realization of,
Paritushyati,
Paritushyati,
does it satisfy,
does it satisfy,
Shariraha,
Shariraha,
identifying the body,
identifying the body,
Atma,
Atma,
self,
self,
Manasaha,
Manasaha,
identifying the mind,
identifying the mind,
Eva,
Eva,
certainly,
certainly,
Va,
Va,
and.
and
Translation. Addressing Vyasadeva,
addressing Vyasadeva,
the son of Parashara,
the son of Parashara,
Narada inquired,
Narada inquired,
are you satisfied by identifying with the body
are you satisfied by identifying with the body
or the mind
or the mind
as objects of self-realization?
as object of self-realization?
Purport. This was a hint by Narada to Vyasadeva regarding the cause of his despondency. Vyasadeva, as the descendant of Parashara, a greatly powerful sage, had the privilege of having a great parentage, which should not have given Vyasadeva cause for despondency. Being a great son of a great father, he should not have identified the self with the body or the mind. Ordinary men with a poor fund of knowledge can identify the body as self or the mind as self, but Vyasadeva should not have done so. One cannot be cheerful by nature unless one is factually seated in self-realization, which is transcendental to the material body and mind. The very same thing confounds Arjuna. Arjuna, along with the other Pandavas, had so much proximity to the Supreme Lord. It is not they did not know anything about the difference between the body and the soul. Yet you find Arjuna thoroughly bewildered due to his deep attachment for his loved ones. And therefore, he was put into a position where he really did not want to fight. So I was reading somewhere that great attachment leads to bewilderment. Too much of attachment for loved ones leads you to making a lot of mistakes in life because you're not able to push back on unethical conduct or inappropriate behavior because of your attachment. I had somebody visit me a couple of days ago, and she was just relaying something personal in her life that she observed. And I was just thinking about this deeply, how fortunate some of us are that we have parents or grandparents that are so clear on what is right and what is wrong. She was talking about how her dad's sister and her husband spoiled the grandson so much that he became violent towards them. They did not allow any restraints on the child whatsoever when he was growing up. So he grew up to be completely self-centered and getting his way. Whatever he wanted, the grandparents gave. They did not allow the mother to discipline him. And that cost him greatly. So you can see even small things like this can just create a catastrophic effect for us. So anyway, coming to the point, attachment, too deep of an attachment can color your vision. You end up making the wrong decisions. So that is actually very dangerous. So we have to keep in mind clarity of what is right and what is wrong. What's the right thing for us and for others and for society as well. So that is very important. So anyway, that brings us to shloka number 3. Jignasitam susampannam
Jignasitam susampannam
apite mahad adbhutam
apite mahadadbhutam
kritavan bharatam yastvam
kritavan bharatam yastvam
sarvartha paribrimhitam
sarvartha paribhramitam
jignasitam,
jignasitam,
fully inquired,
fully inquired,
susampannam,
susampannam,
well versed,
well versed,
api,
api,
in spite of,
in spite of,
te,
te,
your,
your,
mahat adbhutam,
mahat adbhutam,
great and wonderful,
great and wonderful,
kritavan,
kritavan,
prepared,
prepared,
bharatam,
bharatam,
the Mahabharata,
the Mahabharata,
yahtvam,
yah tvam,
what you have done,
what you have done,
sarva artha,
sarva artha,
including all sequences,
including all sequences,
paribrimhitam,
paribhramitam,
elaborately explained.
elaborately explained.
Translation, your inquiries
Your inquiries
were full
were full,
and your studies
and your studies
were also well fulfilled.
were also well fulfilled.
And there is no doubt
And there is no doubt
that you have prepared a great and wonderful work,
that you have prepared a great and wonderful work,
the Mahabharata,
the Mahabharata,
which is full of all kinds of Vedic sequences,
which is full of all kinds of Vedic sequences,
elaborately explained.
elaborately explained.
But the despondency of Vyasadeva was certainly not due to his lack of sufficient knowledge, because as a student, he had fully inquired about the Vedic literatures, as a result of which the Mahabharata is compiled with full explanation of the Vedas. So earlier it was said that Srila Vyasadeva compiled the Mahabharata for those who did not have access to the Vedic scriptures, the Sri Shudras and Vaishyas, the lower class essentially, because it is more accessible to them, more understandable for them, and easy for them to follow, rather than reading elaborately constructed shlokas about Karma Kanda. So Mahabharata in a story form makes it far more palatable and understandable for certain class of people. So that brings us to shloka number 4. Jigyasitam adhitam cha
Jijnasitam adhitam cha
brahma yattat sanatanam
brahmayat tat sanatanam
tathapi shochasyatmanam
tathapi shochasyatmanam
akritartha iva prabho.
akratartha iva prabho.
Jigyasitam.
Jijnasitam,
Deliberated fully well.
deliberated fully well.
Adhitam.
Adhitam,
The knowledge obtained.
the knowledge obtained.
Cha.
Cha,
And.
and
Brahma.
Brahma,
The absolute.
the absolute.
Yat.
Yat,
What?
what?
Tat.
Tat,
That.
that.
Sanatanam.
Sanatanam,
Eternal.
eternal.
Tathapi.
Tathapi,
In spite of that.
in spite of that.
Shochasi.
Shochasi,
Lamenting.
lamenting.
Atmanam.
Atmanam,
Unto the self.
unto the self.
Akrita arthaha.
Akrita arthaha,
Undone.
undone.
Iva.
Iva,
Like.
like.
Prabho.
Prabho,
My dear sir.
my dear sir.
Translation. You have fully delineated
You have fully delineated
the subject of impersonal Brahman
the subject of impersonal Brahman
as well as the knowledge derived therefrom.
as well as the knowledge derived therefrom.
Why should you be despondent
Why should you be despondent
in spite of all of this,
in spite of all this,
thinking that you are undone?
thinking that you are undone?
My dear Prabhu,
My dear Prabhu,
purport. The Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra compiled by Sri Vyasadeva is the full deliberation of the impersonal absolute feature. And it is accepted as the most exalted philosophical exposition in the world. So exalted that all paramparas have written a summary understanding of this. It covers the subject of eternity and the methods are scholarly. So there cannot be any doubt about the transcendental scholarship of Vyasadeva. So why should we lament? Which takes us to shloka number 5. Vyasa uvacha
Vyasa uvacha
astyeva me sarvamidam tvayoktam
astya iva me sarvamidham tvayoktam
tathapi natma paritushyate me
tathapi natma paritushyate me
tanmulam avyaktam agadhabodham
tanmulam avyaktam aghada bodham
pritchamahe tvatma bhavatma bhutam.
prachamaye tvatma bhavatma bhutam.
Vyasaha.
Vyasaha,
Vyasa.
Vyasa,
Uvacha.
uvacha,
Said.
said,
Asti.
asti,
There is.
there is,
Eva.
eva,
Certainly.
certainly,
May.
may,
Mine.
mine,
Sarvam.
sarvam,
All.
all,
Idam.
idam,
This.
this,
Tvaya.
tvaya,
By you.
by you,
Uktam.
uktam,
Uttered.
uttered,
Tathapi.
tathapi,
And yet.
and yet,
Na.
na,
Not.
not,
Atma.
atma,
Self.
self,
Paritushyate.
Paritushyate.
Thus pacify.
Thus pacify.
May.
May.
Unto me.
Unto me.
Tat.
Tat.
Of which.
Of which.
Moolam.
Moolam.
Root.
Root.
Avyaktam.
Avyaktam.
Undetected.
Undetected.
Agadha bodham.
Agadha bodham.
The man of unlimited knowledge.
The man of unlimited knowledge.
Prichhamahe.
Prichhamahe.
Do inquire.
Do inquire.
Twa.
Twa.
Unto you.
Unto you.
Atma bhava.
Atma bhava.
Self-born.
Self-born.
Atma bhutam.
Atma bhutam.
Offspring.
Offspring.
Translation. Srila Vyasadeva said,
Srila Vyasadeva said,
all you have said about me is perfectly correct.
all you have said about me is perfectly correct.
Despite all this,
Despite all this,
I am not pacified.
I am not pacified.
I therefore question you
I therefore question you
about the root cause of my dissatisfaction.
about the root cause of my dissatisfaction.
For you are a man of unlimited knowledge.
For you are a man of unlimited knowledge.
Due to your being the offspring of one
Due to your being the offspring of one
who is self-born.
who is self-born.
In other words, the offspring of Brahma. In the material world, everyone is engrossed with the idea of identifying the body or the mind with the self. As such, all knowledge disseminated in the material world is related either with the body or with the mind. And that is the root cause of all despondencies. If you look at all the subject matters that we've ever studied formally, everything has to ultimately do with matter. Nothing has to do with spirituality. And that is the cause of despair for all of us. This is not always detected, even though one may be the greatest erudite scholar in materialistic knowledge. It is good, therefore, to approach a personality like Narada to solve the root cause of all despondencies. Why Narada should be approached is explained below. That brings us to shloka number 6 of this chapter 5. Savai bhavan veda samasta guhyam
Savai bhavan veda samasta guhyam
upasito yat purushah puranaha
upasito yat purushah puranaha
paravaresho manasaiva vishvam
paravaresho manasaiva vishvam
srijattavyattati gunairasangaha
srijatyavattyati gunair asangaha
saha.
saha.
Thus,
Why?
certainly,
Certainly.
bhavan,
Yourself.
veda,
Veda.
no, samasta,
Samasta.
all inclusive,
All inclusive.
guhyam,
Guhyam.
confidential,
Confidential.
upasitaha,
Upasitaha.
devotee of,
Devotee of.
yat, because, purushaha,
Purushaha.
the personality of Godhead,
The personality of Godhead.
puranaha,
Puranaha.
the oldest,
The oldest.
para avara ishaha,
Paravara Ishaha.
the controller of the material and spiritual worlds,
The controller of the material and spiritual worlds.
manasa,
Manasa.
mind,
Eva.
only, vishvam,
Vishwam.
the universe,
The universe.
srijati,
Srajati.
creates,
creates,
avati atti,
avati atti,
annihilates,
annihilates,
gunaihi,
gunaihi,
by the qualitative matter,
by the qualitative matter,
asangaha,
asangaha,
unattached.
unattached.
Translation: My Lord,
My Lord,
everything that is mysterious
everything that is mysterious
is known to you
is known to you
because you worship
because you worship
the creator and destroyer
the creator and destroyer
of the material world
of the material world
and the maintainer of the spiritual world,
and the maintainer of the spiritual world,
the original personality of Godhead,
the original personality of Godhead,
who is transcendental
who is transcendental
to the three modes of material nature.
to the three modes of material nature.
Prabhupada writes in the purport, a person who is 100% engaged in the service of the Lord is the emblem of all knowledge. Such a devotee of the Lord in full perfection of devotional service is also perfect by the qualification of the personality of Godhead. As such, the eightfold perfections of mystic power, Ashtasiddhi, constitute very little of his godly opulence. A devotee like Narada can act wonderfully by his spiritual perfection, which every individual is trying to attain. Srila Narada is a 100% perfect living being, although not equal to the personality of Godhead. Our acharyas say that the ornaments of a devotee is his or her conduct, sadachar. How we conduct ourselves determines whether we are truly a devotee or not. So we have to exhibit the qualities of patience, compassion, kindness, soberness. So all of these good qualities are visible in devotees. That's how you know that your sadhana is actually working. It's producing results because your conduct has to change. Yeah. Things like, irritability, getting angry, having doubts on others, talking unnecessarily negatively about others. All these things will dissipate if you are strictly following the instructions of Guru, Sadhu, and Shastra, specifically your sadhana, that determines who you are. There is a saying, your actions speak louder than your words. So your actions are deafening. Your conduct is deafening. Your words may not be. So that is the quality of a devotee, is we are kind and compassionate. Yes. So that brings us to Shloka 7, which is the last shloka that we will cover today. Tvam paryatannarka iva trilokim
Tvam paryattan arka iva trilokim
antascharo vayurevatma sakshi
antascharo vayur ivatma sakshi
paravare brahmani dharmato vrataihi
paravare brahmani dharmato vrataihi
snatasya me nyunam alam vichakshva.
स्नातस्य मे न्यूनम अलम विचक्ष्व
Okay. Tvam,
त्वम
your goodness.
your goodness
Pariyatan,
पर्यटन
traveling.
traveling
Arkaha,
अर्कः
the sun.
the sun
Iva,
iva
like.
like
Trilokim,
trilokim
the three worlds.
the three worlds
Antaha charaha,
Antah Charaha
can penetrate into everyone's heart.
can penetrate into everyone's heart.
Vayuhu iva,
Vayuhu Iva,
as good as the all-pervading air.
as good as the all pervading air.
Atma,
Atma,
self-realized.
self realized.
Sakshi,
Sakshi,
witness.
witness.
Para avare,
Para avare,
in the matter of cause and effect.
in the matter of cause and effect.
Brahmani,
Brahmani,
in the absolute.
in the absolute.
Dharmataha,
Dharmataha,
under disciplinary regulations.
under disciplinary regulations.
Vrataihi,
Vrataihi,
in vow.
in vow.
Snatasya,
Snatasya,
having been absorbed in.
having been absorbed in.
Me,
May,
mine.
mine.
Nunam,
Nunam,
deficiency.
deficiency.
Alam,
Alam,
clearly.
clearly.
Vichakshva,
Vichakshva,
search out.
search out.
Translation, like the sun,
Like the sun,
your goodness can travel everywhere in the three worlds.
your goodness can travel everywhere in the three worlds.
And like the air,
And like the air,
you can penetrate the internal region of everyone.
you can penetrate the internal region of everyone.
As such, you are as
As,
good
as such, you are as good
as the all-pervasive supersoul.
as the all pervasive supersoul.
Please, therefore,
Please, therefore,
find out the deficiency in me,
find out the deficiency in me,
despite my being absorbed
despite my being absorbed
in transcendence
in transcendence
under disciplinary regulations and vows.
under disciplinary regulations and vows.
So Prabhupada writes in the purport here, transcendental realization, pious activities, worshipping the deities, charity, mercifulness, non-violence, and studying the scriptures under strict disciplinary regulations are always helpful. So from shlokas 1 to 4, Narad Muni was asking, what's your problem? What happened? Why are you so despondent? And in shlokas 5, 6, and 7, Vyasadeva is saying, I don't know what the problem is with me. Can you tell me what the problem is with me? Because you know everything. So I was listening to Gauranga Darshan Prabhu's lecture on these shlokas right before the class. And he was saying that these shlokas depict what an ideal disciple should be like. Always humble in front of his spiritual master, always ready to clarify doubts that he has, always asking the spiritual master to kindly rectify whatever or identify the areas that the disciple should focus on for rectification. Keeping in mind that Srila Vyasadeva himself is an incarnation of the Lord. But he was simply put into this position so that the Guru can come and give the instruction right about the Supreme Lord. So to the question about the history of Srimad Bhagavatam, how did it come about that it was compiled? This is the reason. Srila Vyasadeva was not satisfied with what he and his disciples had done. And at that time, his spiritual master comes to give him appropriate guidance and encouragement. That is the spiritual master's job. Sri Krishna does the same thing for Arjuna and Bhagavad Gita. As much as Krishna begins chapter 2 chastising Arjuna, saying that he's demonstrating weakness, that it is unbecoming of a warrior to do so. Similarly, here Narada Muni says, you already know everything, but you seem to have identified with the body and the mind, but you already know the truth. But nevertheless, the spiritual master also glorifies the devotee and identifies what is it that they've done really well, and then what is it that they need to focus on. In the corporate world, actually, it is the proper way of providing feedback is called a sandwich. You begin with the positive, give the feedback, and then end with the positive. But with Guru Shishya, it will not happen like that. It will begin with chastisement and then on a positive note with encouragement and guidance, right? So this is the mood of a disciple in front of the spiritual master. In front of the spiritual master, you never say, I know everything. You can't. You have to say, I don't know anything and I need your help and guidance. So that's the ideal relationship between Guru and disciple. The willingness to listen and the willingness to be corrected by the disciple. I was listening to a little pastime earlier in the morning when I was listening to some lecture. This is a pastime with His Holiness Sri Radhanath Swami Maharaj and his disciples. As the number of projects keep increasing in different temples, in different institutions. In this particular case, it was the Govardhan Eco Village that Sri Radhanath Swami Maharaj had set up, which is like a mini replica of Vrindavan in Maharashtra, which you can go and visit. So one of his disciples was feeling very despondent, and he was just making a statement saying, as the projects and responsibilities keep increasing for the brahmacharis, it means there is less time for them to associate and spend with their spiritual master. So he was expressing that the distance is increasing between the disciple and the spiritual master, and how am I going to get corrected? How do I know that what I'm doing is right or wrong? That was his question. His question was, as my responsibilities increase and our association reduces, how do I know that I'm doing the right thing? To which Radhanath Swami Maharaj responded by saying, do you believe in the super soul? He asked his disciple, do you believe in the super soul? And the disciple said, yes. And Maharaj said, the super soul is the vehicle to instruct and inform the Guru what is necessary for that particular disciple that needs to be corrected. So what is going right or wrong in your life, you will still get the instructions. You may not get it personally from your spiritual master. You may hear it from the lips of other devotees. For example, I'll just give you a personal example that happened to me personally yesterday. After taking second initiation, there are a lot of new mantras you have to memorize. And I had not memorized certain mantras. Okay. So yesterday, we had a wonderful devotee by name His Grace Ramrup Prabhu who had come. He's the disciple of His Holiness Gopal Krishna Swami Maharaj. And he took a class for us on what it means to perform deity worship. What is the mood you should have, and how do we go about doing our services in that proper mood. And through the class, he just landed on me and asked me if I knew a particular mantra. And in my mind, I was telling myself every day I will practice in the morning, but somehow I never made time for it. But I was feeling guilty. I was feeling very guilty that I had not set aside time to learn some of these mantras. How did I get chastised? Because when you don't learn the mantras, you are letting your spiritual master down. How did I get chastised? Through my spiritual master, through the lips of His Grace Ramrupa Prabhu yesterday. He asked me to recite the mantra, and I knew the first 3 lines and didn't know the next 3 lines. So he just looked at me saying, how can you not memorize the mantras? So I realized, okay, whatever I was feeling guilty about was validated that I have to prioritize this now. I was carrying this guilt with me for some time, for a couple of weeks, 2-3 weeks, knowing that I should memorize a whole set of mantras, but I had not. I was using a sheet of paper to guide me. So now so this is how Guru chastises you in front of everyone. How come you have not learned the mantras? So when you do deity worship, you have to be serious about learning a whole lot of mantras. You know, how do you do full archaman? How do you purify the water that is there in the archaman cup? The purification mantra I did not know. I had not memorized. Then there are certain mantras that you recite after you do archaman. I have not memorized those mantras. So this is how we get chastised, or it's like it is like telling you you can't hide. You can feel guilty and think nobody else knows. Only I know that I've not memorized the mantra. Nobody's taking a test in the temple every day for me on these mantras. But how I was identified yesterday for not knowing the mantra. So this is a way in which you get messages. It may not necessarily be from the lips of the spiritual master. Through the aegis of the super soul, you will be called out for not doing your duty, for not doing your responsibility, even on the spiritual path. So you have to be ready to receive this kind of feedback and be ready to address it. You know, so that is what guru-disciple relationship means. You will hear the right message specifically for you at the right time from the lips of some devotee. You know, so anyway, it was a wonderful session yesterday, a lot of learning experience for us who are doing little seva for the deities in the temple. So we'll stop our session here today. Thank you very much for joining us for our Sunday Srimad Bhagavatam class after a little break since Janmashtami. Thank you very much.